welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony. He's Ron. Together, we're about to uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the corporate and mainstream media. Ron, we have a lot to talk about, as we always do, but let's start with some breaking news, shall we? Because the supposed ceasefire that Donald Trump said he could arrange within 24 hours after becoming president, or even after winning the election, I seem to remember, before he even got into the White House, that still isn't happening. And the latest on that is that Trump is now backtracking yet again. He's accusing Zilinskis of jeopardizing what he claimed was an imminent peace deal to end the war in Ukraine, as he gave the clearest hint yet that the US would be willing to formally recognize Russia's seizure of Crimea as part of any agreement. Let's remind people Crimea is sovereign Ukrainian territory. You predicted this. I predicted this. Anybody who's been looking carefully knows that Trump's basically going to do, ultimately, whatever Putin wants.
Yeah, the priority here for Trump, the first priority is not ending the war or anything else. The first priority here is becoming aligned with Russia against Europe. And this is something we've talked about many times. He wants to make deals with Russia. He wants to make trade deals with them. He wants to lift sanctions. And this war in Ukraine is in the way. And so he's got to find a way, to end this somehow. He claimed he had a secret plan all throughout the campaign that was going to end it in 24 hours. I know exactly what to say to Putin. I know exactly what to say. It'll be over in 24 hours, one conversation, right? So here we are over 3 months in. So this is supposed to be the big face-to-face talks in London between Zilinskis, the top Ukrainian negotiators, and was supposed to be Marco Rubio, Witkoff, who had just met with Putin, and they were going to try and hammer something out, and then go back to the Kremlin. But then Rubio announced 36 hours before the meeting he wasn't going now. Witkoff too, and they were just going to send Keith Kellogg, who's just the special envoy to Ukraine. So, and he's just showing up with this list of U.S. demands, which exactly tracks Putin's demands. I mean, this is the U.S. demands: abandon claims of Crimea, right? Cessation of hostilities along the current front, lift all sanctions. The nuclear power plant, the U.S. will take over their nuclear power plant along with other power plants, and Ukraine will refuse to join NATO. But and the minerals agreement. So in other words, everything that Russia wants, with the exception of a rigged election in Ukraine where they can install a puppet, is right there. The funny part about it is that this is a deal designed for Ukraine to reject. The Trump administration knows that Zelensky is going to reject this deal because there's no way he can take this back to his people. We've just given away a third of our country, given up our mineral rights, given up control of our energy infrastructure. We'll never get to join NATO. What's not to like, right?
Yeah. It's designed to fail, isn't it?
Yeah, it's designed to fail, and it's designed to blame Zelensky because there's nothing in that deal that makes Russia give up anything. What does Russia have? What does the aggressor have to give up? They have to give up no territory. They give up nothing. And they get sanctions lifted as part of this deal. So they actually benefit tremendously in this deal from the invasion. So we all know how this is going to play out. This is going to fall apart because Trump has no plan. And he's going to blame Zelensky, and then he's going to try and lift sanctions. But the problem is that Congress enacted these sanctions by statute. So Trump legally does not have the authority to lift sanctions against Russia. So we may see how that plays out in the near future.
Do you get as frustrated as I do that Trump is clearly on the side of Putin, clearly trying to align the US with Russia, clearly trying to make enemies of Europe and the rest of the world, and yet the media still fail to articulate his denial, Russia, the Russia hoax, and all of the proof that we have of his relationship with Putin over the years. And it's almost to me as if the media, they don't really want to make that connection that is so obvious to anybody who's paying attention.
No, they don't at all. I mean, they've completely left all those allegations in the rearview mirror from 2017. And it has allowed Trump to reset the narrative,
Right.
just like he has done with January 6th and other things, where he just lies. There's no response from the other side. And, eventually the lies become truth to a lot of people, not to everyone. And so, yeah, that's what he's doing. And so, it should be obvious that the media never points out, why don't you ever criticize Putin? What? Never, ever. He's never said a harsh word about Putin. It's always only Zelensky. So, yeah, this is as we predicted, this is going to end badly. It's going to end badly for everyone. And the real question is, we know for a fact that there are at least half the senators, Republican senators, who are strongly in support of Ukraine, who have been very silent up to this point. Occasionally, one of them will speak up without, of course, criticizing Trump,
saying his name. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the big question is, if Trump really does try and lift sanctions, or what he could do is refuse to help provide assistance to Ukraine, cut off intel, cut off aid. If that happens, which I expect he will try and do that, what will Republicans in Congress who are pro-Ukraine, what will they do?
My prediction is they will do nothing, and they will continue to fall foul of this authoritarian regime, because they've done their deal with the devil. And so this is how the story plays out. I've been listening to what J.D. Vance has been saying on this. He actually said, I think it was this morning, that we'll, if they don't agree to it, we'll walk away.
Yeah.
And those words to me are very poignant.
Well, whatever that means, he said that, and so did Rubio.
Yeah.
So the question is, what does that mean? Does that mean, okay, we'll walk away from trying to broker a peace deal, and we'll continue to provide aid and assistance to Ukraine to fight this war? If that's the case, then fine, because that's probably the best way to deal with Putin, is to continue to wear him down through attrition. But I suspect that what they're saying when they say walk away, they're saying we're going to walk away from helping Ukraine.
100%.
And that's the problem. And I don't think the media hasn't reported it that way. They just say walk away. Well, the media has never asked a follow-up question. When you say walk away, what do you mean? You mean walk away from peace talks, or walk away from aid to Ukraine?
Are you talking about doing journalism, though, Ron? And this is, I don't think this is really in their wheelhouse anymore. It's infotainment. Let's I want to read this ridiculous post that Trump put out. Was it last night or this morning?
This morning.
And it's long, so I apologize in advance. This is just the workings of how Trump views this situation. And let me kind of read it as quickly as I can. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There is nothing to talk about here. This statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia, in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Obama, and not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? The area also houses, for many years before the Obama handover, major Russian submarine bases. It's inflammatory statements like Zilinskis that make it so difficult to settle this war. He has nothing to boast about. The situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace, or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. I have nothing to do with Russia, but I have much to do with wanting to save on average 5,000 Russian Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. The statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would never have started if I were president. Whew, that was a mouthful. I hate to repeat his garbage, but the point here, though, is that, again, if you analyze the language, everything is in Putin's favor. And everything is like, a bit for you, a bit for Mr. Putin. Like, it's never, he doesn't see, as obviously Europe does, that Ukraine is an independent sovereign nation that was invaded by Russia, territory was stolen, people were murdered. He doesn't think about that at all. This is just about him and how he moves on with his business dealings, which, as you said earlier, are likely to involve trade with Russia.
Yeah, Vladimir Putin, his spokesman Peskov, his foreign minister Lavrov have all criticized the deal that's been proposed by the United States, previous proposals.
Yeah,
different aspects of it, and they've all said, "Oh, we're not doing that. That's a non-starter." Multiple times. What about when Putin said, "We won't agree to any ceasefire negotiations unless Zelensky holds elections in Ukraine"? Like, Trump never criticizes them. He never calls them out with long rants on Truth Social when they reject a specific proposal. It's always, the criticism is always Zelensky, always about Zelensky. And look, I know, I follow Zelensky closely, everything he says, and I know every time he gets frustrated and pops off like that, like he did about Crimea and other things, I know I almost wince, because I know, like, this is going to give Trump an excuse to go after him and blame him. And so, yes, I wish that he wouldn't make public statements about.
But he has to be true to himself and to his people.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, he represents the people of Ukraine. They're fighting for their life. And so, while on the one hand, looking at it from the prism of United States politics, like I do, I get where, like, that's not helpful here to him. But I understand he's got to stand up for his country and himself. So I can't fault the guy.
Trump always lies about the number of people killed in Ukraine.
Yeah,
he was saying
nowhere near that number of casualties.
No, I think the total number on both sides, including civilians, is 158,000 currently. Might be a little more than that. That was from March.
I already posted. I posted this earlier this week. Every number that Trump posts or says, whether it's about eggs, the economy, Ukraine casualties, inflation, unemployment, every time Trump uses a number, it's always wildly exaggerated, false, and in his favor. And he just did it again right there in that post.
Again, if the media was doing journalism, they would clip every different number for the same thing and edit them together one after the other, just to make the point that his figures are inaccurate. But again, there is a failure.
Anything. I mean, take the number of migrants. I mean, I listen to every speech. It's 10 million, it's 12 million, it's 20 million, it's 25 million, it's 17 million. Every time he says it, it's a different number, and none of those are anywhere. It was right around 10 million that came in during the Biden presidency. That's the number that, DHS, Biden's own DHS put out. It's not 20 million or 25 million like they claim. So
the other thing that he does so regularly is this kind of reference to soon. And in this post, hopefully Russia and Ukraine, spelled AMD, Ukraine, will make a deal this week. Both will then start to do business with the United States of America, which is thriving, and make a fortune. We can talk about what he references there regarding make a fortune. This is his new thing, isn't it? Everyone's going to make a fortune if they do business with the US. He's going to make a fortune. I think that's what he's really referring to. But it's this idea of, the peace deal is soon. It's coming soon. It's this week. It's a little bit like infrastructure week, or a little bit like the health care plan that, Trump promised last time around. It's always next week, in 2 weeks' time. But these things never materialize.
Yeah, it's trade deals, right? Everybody's banging down his door wanting to sign deals, right? They haven't reached any, but it's always coming.
Yeah.
You could go back and look at, I almost posted this clip the other day, but I decided not to. I mean, you could go back and look at back to the 80s. I mean, every time Trump launches a company or a product, You can go back and watch the news conferences that he gives, and I put out a montage of these a long time ago, like 20 of them.
Yeah.
And everything is always like, this is going to be the greatest, this is going to be the biggest, the best ever. And then these things go out of business within a year. I mean, he's just doing the same thing now. Everything is a hype, everything is oversold. It's like taking televangelism and putting it into politics, and so everything's imminent, everything's about to happen right around the corner. Golden era, golden age, we're going to pay no taxes, tariffs are going to take care of everything. And we saw it during the campaign, the war is going to end in 24 hours. Well, of course, the reason why we clipped that and posted that so often is because we knew it was utterly preposterous. Like, no serious person believed that he or anybody else was going to end this conflict in 24 hours. But he continued to insist that it was true over and over again.
It was propaganda to win the election.
Blatant lie.
Right.
Yeah.
I watched The Apprentice movie last night. Did you see it yet?
No, I did not. No.
Well, I've been waiting for it to become free on the services, and eventually I was like, I need to see it. My mum's here. We wanted to watch it. It was $5.99. I was like, fine, independent movies. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. And I paid, yeah. And I like to support independent movies, Good. And this is, of course, the story of Roy Cohn and that relationship very early on. And there is a scene in the limo, the origin story. There's a scene in the limo where he's just kind of got together with Roy Cohn, and he's on the phone talking about how he wants this building in New York to be the biggest and the best. And it's Roy Cohn who's encouraging him off the phone to say, bigger, 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 make it more, make it more, make it more. Yeah. It was a very interesting moment, that, because if that is true, and I mean that this movie is based in truth, he clearly had a mentor there, somebody who knew exactly how to manipulate things, including local law enforcement and the local mayor and everybody else. I really recommend the film. It's a little difficult to watch at times, especially when he's having his scalp reduction surgery, but it covers that period in the early 80s where Trump was really being mentored by this man to be a salesman.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't see the movie, but of course I've seen many documentaries and read lots about this. And so, yeah, I mean, Trump, it literally is Roy Cohn. He is a more polished, wealthy version of the Roy
TV
Cohn.
version.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, exactly. So, but literally, like, everything that Roy Cohn was and believed in, except for Roy Cohn was gay. But other than that, that's Trump. Trump is literally like the reincarnation of him. He's keeping his spirit alive. And of course, Roy Cohn started out as counsel for Joseph McCarthy on the House Un-American Affairs Committee too. So he was just a despicable guy, and so it's no surprise that Trump was drawn to him.
Well, what's also interesting is the actor Sebastian Stan, I think his name is, who plays Trump, doesn't do a caricature of him. He kind of plays the role quite subtly, rather brilliantly. But because we all know Trump so well, because we've all been exposed to so much footage of him, is that as a viewer, you project the real Trump onto this actor. And so by the end of the movie, you're 100% convinced that it's as if you're watching a documentary. Very interesting how Trump has got into our bones, literally. And it's not something I'm proud of. I revile that man. But this is what we're dealing with. This is, and it was no different to Hitler during the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s. You become, Trump calls it Trump derangement syndrome. And he's kind of right. It might even be the only thing I agree with him about.
Yeah, I thought, when COVID happened, it really illustrated for everyone in the country, like it exposed a lot of people for who they really are, how much they care about other people, what level of consideration they have, etc. And I think it's the same thing with Trump. Trump has done the same thing with the American public. We really know a lot more where people stand on racism, immigration. I mean, he literally forces, that's the one thing about Trump. He literally forces you as an American to take a side on a lot of hot button issues. And so I think we've really found out amongst our friends, our family, our coworkers, in many ways that we did not know before 2016, really who they are as people. And I think for a lot of us, we've been surprised, I think, by a lot of people that we come in contact with in our lives about who they are that maybe we didn't really know before Trump brought it out.
This Sunday on the Weekend Show, I have Professor Timothy Snyder on, who wrote the book on tyranny and on freedom. And I just want to give it a little plug at this moment because we talk a lot about this, exactly this, and how the rise of fascism has kind of really captured a lot of people's imaginations in the US. So that's this Sunday here on the Midas Touch Network at 8 p.m. Eastern. Let's talk about China, Ron, because the tariffs have yet again taken a bit of a detour, a bit of a pivot. They were up to 245%, I think, on China at their max. Now Donald Trump has decided that actually, and somebody's obviously whispering in his ear, that no, we're not actually going to do any tariffs on China. I mean, there'll be something, but it'll be a bit, it'll probably be nothing. I mean, it was nothing, but actually it'll just be something. Let's take a look.
Earlier today, Treasury Secretary Hegseth suggested that with the tariff rates as high as they are now, it's effectively an embargo of trade between the United States and China. Do you see it that way?
That's true. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high.
What level do you think it'll come down to if you have it?
It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero. We were just destroyed. China was taking us for a ride, and just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to be very good to China, have a great relationship with President Xi, but they would make billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, and they would build their military out of the United States and what they made, so that won't happen. But they're going to do very well, and I think they're going to be happy, and I think we're going to live together very happily and ideally work together. So I think it's going to work out very well. But no, it's at 145%. It will not be anywhere near that number.
What?
Yeah, I mean, like the correct follow-up that just screams out to me, to everyone who's with half a brain, is, are you saying that you're going to do that unilaterally? I mean, that's the follow-up question. He says he's going to now he's saying he's going to lower them, right? All of a sudden, out of the blue, he's going to,
after causing chaos,
nothing. There's
chaos
no
around the whole world. He now is rewinding the clock 3 weeks.
I mean, and there's no negotiations between China and the United States. There's nothing happening. So all of a sudden he just comes out and says, oh, no, it's too high. They're going to come down. So the follow-up question is, are you saying then that you are going to lower the tariffs unilaterally without a trade deal? Is that what you're saying because you set them too high? What exactly are you saying? Or is he simply saying, well, we expect eventually China to come to a deal so they won't be this high? I mean, which of those two things are you saying? You're surrendering, or you're hoping that you're going to get a better deal? Because the markets all pay attention to this stuff and swing wildly on this stuff. And so here's what's really going on. These China tariffs are starting to get to a crisis level. If you look at all the metrics in terms of shipping containers coming into West Coast ports from China,
right, the supply chain
that are being offloaded, inventories that are in small businesses and factories of merchandise, all of those things are coming down rapidly. People are running out of what happens is businesses right now are not ordering stuff from China because they don't want to get hit with the tariffs. So they're drawing down their inventories in their warehouses. They're selling their stuff, and they're hoping like hell that these tariffs are going to somehow get lifted any day now. But most of these companies, what I read is they got, a month or 2 months of inventory left, and then they're out of business. So this is what Trump is hearing. Trump just met with the CEO of Walmart, Target, all these big retail, and they all told him this. They're like, dude, we're running out of inventory. and we can't stay in business with paying 145%.
And if
we
these
can't build new
companies,
factories in the U.S. to make all this shit overnight.
If these companies, these huge companies like Target and Walmart, which are vast companies with huge reserves and stock and wealth, if they can't weather what Trump has brought about, then what's that going to do for any medium to small business that will just collapse literally within weeks under Trump's proposal?
Tens of thousands of small businesses
all
over the United States who sell stuff from China.
Right.
Whether it's toys, whether it's Lincoln Logs, whether it's Legos, whether it's, everything that you could think of, fake eyelashes, all this stuff comes from China. And there's so many little small businesses all over America that rely on it. So yes, when he made that statement right there yesterday, that was right after his meeting with those CEOs. So he's hearing it from the business community and from Wall Street. The problem is, how can he knows he's screwed up. I think at this point, he's heard from enough people that he knows that this is a huge mistake, putting these incredibly massive tariffs. But the problem is, how does he save face? How does he get out of this when China refuses to throw him a bone? Like he won't even talk to him. So I think what he's searching for desperately is for China to give him something, any small little token where he can then go and say and declare victory. Okay, since China has agreed to do this, I will now agree to lower the tariffs. They surrendered. Like that's what he's looking for. And it doesn't appear that President Xi is willing to give him anything to declare victory on. So he's stuck.
Do you notice how the two major superpowers, Russia and China, are treating Trump exactly the same way? They're both using the same tactics because they do have the might and the strength and the nuclear capability. Let's not forget that they're both basically cutting contact and allowing him to hang himself. That's their tactic. And Russia has been successful with the Ukraine war in that way, and China exactly the same. Xi and Putin, I wonder if they're on the phone together going, no, don't call him, leave it another couple of days. This is hilarious. Just watch what he's going to do next.
Yeah, I think that other countries are probably watching this, and especially Europe, and learning a lesson about how to handle Trump.
Right.
If they just sit back and wait and watch American domestic politics and the American economy happen, I mean, the pressures are going to become greater and greater on Trump to back down. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to run and make some kind of deal with Trump. No. The most interesting thing to watch is good. First of all, there's two things. There are two countries to watch, in my opinion: Japan and India.
Right.
So, Vance was just over in India talking with Modi. Trump views, I think he views the massive Indian population as maybe we can shift some of this. Of course, the manufacturing is all supposed to be coming to the United States. But I think right now they're looking at how can we move some of this stuff to India and take advantage of their labor market and make some stuff there instead of in China. So I think they're looking at that. But the problem is India, they have deals with China. They have deals with Russia. They're not looking to rock the boat here either. They're playing both sides. But Japan is also an interesting question because that seems to be the country that Trump is really pushing hard to be the first country to make a deal. But the problem is Japan has almost no tariffs on the United States. I mean, we have some on our food, but that's about it. And so, they're like, what can we do for you? Our people don't want to buy your stuff. I mean, so we can't make them buy American products. Our tariffs are already super low against the United States. So what do you want from us? And so I think that probably will be the first trade deal is Japan, and they'll probably give some small token thing. But what we're going to see when we really look at this deal is that Japan has done almost nothing. But the Trump administration is so desperate to announce a win because remember one thing, Peter Navaro, when the tariffs were announced, 12 days ago, that the new tariffs, Peter Navarro said, we expect to have 90 deals with 90 countries in 90 days. Well, this is day 12, and they have no deals.
Let's take a look.
So we're going to run 90 deals in 90 days is possible. The boss is going to be the chief negotiator. Nothing's done without him looking very carefully at it. He has such a fine attention to detail. Scott Bessent is going to handle countries like Japan and South Korea, where there's a lot of currency issues associated with that. And then you have Kevin Hassett, who you had many times on your show, who's really, really good analytically, and also is carrying the football with Scott on the tax policy, which is an important part of our situation.
Yeah,
Stephen Miller is doing a beautiful job coordinating things, and J.D. Vance has just been a breath of fresh air. I knew Mike Pence well. I liked Mike, but Mike didn't know anything about policy, and he was hamstrung by this guy, Mark Short, who was his chief of staff, who destroyed Pence's career.
They're like, okay, yeah, you don't need to, you're just saying anything now. It's too much information. Navaro is interesting, isn't he? I don't feel sorry for him, but I see his naivety, and I recognize that he's like so many people in the Trump cabinet and administration, that he's so out of his depth that, they don't really bring any skill set at that high level to any of these meetings.
Yeah, he was like an economics professor at the University of San Diego, and Trump brought him in to do this. So yeah, he's totally in. The funny part is what we just saw. These guys constantly praise each other. Right. If you notice, if you listen to them closely, every time they give an interview, they always praise Trump.
The boss.
But they're always this person is great, Musk is great, everybody's great. But then every report that you read from behind the scenes, they all hate each other, and they're all screaming and yelling at each other. Like, Navaro is one of the most hated people in the administration.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a new report from Axios out today that says that Musk and Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, absolutely despise each other, and we're just in each other's face having a screaming match, yelling and screaming because Musk wanted to install his guy in charge of the IRS, and Bessent had a different guy in mind. So, and it's under Bessent's jurisdiction. So, what we're constantly reading about infighting, people that don't like each other, and yet, they always go on TV and they're constantly praising each other, how everybody's great and everybody's wonderful. It's such nonsense.
But this is why this is why we have to recognize that it's an authoritarian regime, because that's how they operate too.
Yeah.
Praising the Führer, talking up, the generals, using this kind of language to put a positive spin on the fact that what they're doing is atrocious. And it's so interesting to me that, he has one meeting with the bosses of Walmart and Target, and he's like, oh yeah. Oh, right. Okay, better change it then. Yeah. It's like, why not consult with those people after the election?
I mean, every report we have, but see, this is how the Trump White House operates.
Yeah.
So he'll have that meeting and he'll go, oh, shit, I didn't really know about that. I didn't think about that. Yeah, maybe we should lift these tariffs. And then Navaro comes in and goes, boss, you can't do that,
right.
and Lutnick, no way, no way. And then they leave, and Musk comes in and, yeah, we got to lift these China tariffs. They're my business partner. I mean, you have all these factions, and Trump just changes his mind. The last person he talks to is the one he goes with, the one praising him the most, or the one offering him the best, deal for himself. So it's a completely dysfunctional White House where everybody is sniping at each other. And I think we're going to see before the end of this year, as we saw in the first term, a major cabinet shakeup, because these people can't coexist. And of course, what we also heard is that Musk is bailing out, right? He's bailing out. He's leaving next month. And, of course, the White House is spinning this like, oh, this was always planned. He was always going to leave. Oh, no.
The Tesla share price is down 71%.
Minimum a year, and most likely for the whole term. Now, all of a sudden, it's gone. And of course, a huge reason for that is what's happening with Tesla. But that's not the only reason. No. The other reason is the majority of the cabinet in this administration cannot stand Elon Musk, and he's worn out his welcome.
Well, and the rest of us too. Let's take a look.
I just want to emphasize that the tariff decision is entirely up to the President of the United States. I will weigh in with my advice with the President, which he will listen to my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision. I've been on the record many times as saying that I believe lower tariffs are generally a good idea for prosperity. But this decision is fundamentally up to the elected representative of the people, being the President of the United States. So, I'll continue to advocate for lower tariffs rather than higher tariffs, but that's all I can do.
Oh, so suddenly Musk believes in democracy after spending $270 million to swing the election for Donald Trump in the first place, knowing that tariffs were his only economic policy.
I mean, you see here the conflict of interest, though. I mean, he is on a earnings call. He is reporting their quarterly earnings to shareholders. That's what he's doing right there. And that's not a media interview. That's him talking to his shareholders after reporting dismal earnings and sales over the first quarter of this year. And, so he's got to say to them, look, I'm against these tariffs because the tariffs are hurting his company. The tariffs absolutely are hurting Tesla and will hurt Tesla because China is Elon Musk's largest business partner. And he gets a lot of his components and materials to make his cars, even the ones that he makes here, from China. And so, so this is the crazy thing is he has to come out publicly to his shareholders and say that he opposes Trump's trade policy. That's what he's saying there. And you can see the friction and the conflict because, when the policy of the administration is one thing, but Musk is out here saying something, I don't agree with that. I give the president my advice, but he's ignoring it, is basically what he's saying there. I mean, you can't, that's not any way to run an administration.
And this is affecting all the major US companies because they're also linked with China. It's not just parts, it's even sales. I mean, Boeing this week, they sent 2 planes to China who are a customer buying, China Airlines, whatever, were buying these planes. And because of the tariffs, China turned the plane around in the sky and sent it back to Seattle because they couldn't afford to accept them with these new tariffs. The cost of the aircraft would have been too much. And of course, with planes, you pay when you receive it. So, and the other thing I wanted to say on this, which is something that, again, the media have dropped the ball on, is that all of these companies, when Trump talks about how China has stolen from us and they're ripping us off and they're rinsing us and we want to bring it back, who do you think put these factories to work in China? It was the Americans, these American companies. You think when Steve Jobs started Apple in Steve Wozniak's garage in California and they were like, okay, let's build this en masse. They didn't start building them in the US. They tried to do a deal with China. And the rest is history. It is not the fault of China that all of these major US manufacturers are taking advantage of cheap labor in China.
And no regulations. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk did it. He built a huge factory there.
Yeah.
He didn't manufacture the Teslas here and send them to China. Although some of them are. So some of his EVs that he sells in China come from here. And you know what? He can't ship any of them. Like the tariffs are so high on Tesla now, can't sell a single Tesla made in the United States and China at the moment. And so obviously, this hurts him tremendously. So there's no happy ending here.
No, this is rampant profiteering from companies who don't want to pay a living wage to American workers. So
Right.
They have gone out of their way to outsource all of this stuff to cheaper territories. And yet Trump doesn't mention that in any of his argument about why we should be putting these huge tariffs on these foreign nations.
Yep. Well, most of these people who own these companies are his supporters and donors. So yeah, he can't go after them personally. He can't go after them individually. So he's got to go after China. You're right. The blame is on the CEOs here in the United States. it's not in China. What is China supposed to say? No, we're not going to accept the deal. We're not going to build the factory here. No,
China is the contractor.
not
China's
their
not the originator. These, you buy an Apple product that's designed in California, made invariably in Foxconn in China. That is a decision by an American company to do that. And they tried with recently. I remember there was a product last time Trump was president. He did this whole press thing with Tim Cook and, oh, yes, we're going to build a factory here. And they struggle. They absolutely struggle to manufacture in the U.S. We are just not cut out for it. And how Trump and Navaro and all of these guys, Lutnick especially, how they can claim that American workers are going to want to do these jobs. I mean, we touched on this last week. Again, there's no follow-up on that. There's no pushing back on, well, what jobs? Like, explain exactly what jobs you're talking about. What have you projected here? Which experts have you consulted to show which actual jobs are going to happen in the U.S. that American people are going to be able to do?
Yeah. So what's going to be the book, how is the final chapter going to be written on Musk's tenure? A total disaster. He wrecked his company by doing this. Did permanent, the word I used from an auto industry analyst, the word I read in the Financial Times yesterday was permanent damage, permanent reputation damage to his company. Permanent. The analyst said, even if Musk leaves today, there are millions of people around the world who will never buy a Tesla for the rest of their life because of what's already transpired. The only thing he can do at this point is stop the bleeding now and try and make no more new people hate him and hate his products. So that and the Tesla shareholders are begging for him to leave the government and stay out of politics. But
meanwhile, he's trying to get this deal to build the Golden Dome for Donald Trump. The US version of the Iron Dome, which he's doing with Peter Thiel, who he was in business with PayPal in. He's, of course, one of these kind of libertarian tech oligarchs who already has all these government contracts. And again, huge conflict of interest. I mean, this thing is worth billions. And SpaceX, who already have government contracts, now joining forces with Palantir and another company with the guy who started the Oculus company. Again, these are all Trump donors and fundraisers.
Yeah, and I could say, like, here's first of all, that's something that has to be approved by Congress. It's a massive expenditure. So anybody who Trump can't just say unilaterally with a stroke of a pen, I'm awarding $500 billion to Musk to do. No, this has to go through Congress. It's obviously not going to happen this year. It's not part of this budget. It's unlikely to ever happen. But if it does happen, then Congress would have to award the contract to Musk, and then they're going to have to answer to voters on that. And so we'll see. But yeah, this is the Musk. Here's what I the problem is, even if Musk leaves Doge, he's not going to shut up about politics. He's not going to stop posting things on X. So it's not really going to make a huge difference.
He's made his bed, Yeah. I mean, I think the worst thing he did was, well, two things: USAID and gutting that. I think people, now they've learned what USAID does or did and the influence that it had around the world. I think people are really pissed about that. And second thing is the firing of federal workers en masse.
Yeah.
I think neither of those did any good for his reputation. And we discussed this the other day, but people are coming up with all these interesting stickers for the backs of their Teslas now because they can't sell their Teslas because they're not worth anything. So they're having to write F Musk and stuff on the backs of the cars just to prove that they're not in support of this regime. We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about RFK Jr., the things that he has been saying in the last week or so about autism and ADHD and everything else. I mean, this
sperm counts.
Sperm counts, yeah. He really has crossed another line. We'll do that next here on Uncovered. When you start a podcast, it seems like you have to figure it all out on your own. Scripts and setup and filming schedule, logos. It can be super overwhelming, and every day seems to introduce a new decision that needs an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write podcast descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready to Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/uncovered. Go to shopify.com/uncovered. That's shopify.com/uncovered. A secret weapon is a great asset to have in your back pocket. It helps you get ahead in life. And that's how Mack Weldon thinks about clothing, as a secret weapon, timeless classic style that's infused with performance fabrics and hidden details. Whether you're looking for light as air underwear, anti-odor tees, or sweaters with lightweight warmth, Mack Weldon has a full range of clothes that feel comfortable all day long and never go out of style. I love these black tees that I wear from Mack Weldon. They're comfortable. They allow me to breathe without getting hot and sweaty despite my environment. Some people want to look good without calling attention to themselves. Well, Mack Weldon apparel gives you understated looks for understated confidence. They're not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. Mack Weldon clothes are designed to fit your style and demands of modern life. They look like regular clothes, but they feel like the latest in modern comfort. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to mackweldon.com and get 25% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code UNCOVERED. That's mackweldon.com. Promo code UNCOVERED. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. And here is my Mack Weldon shirt, just to give you something to look at while we're discussing RFK Jr. So this guy has basically gone into the Department of Health and Human Services and basically set a dumpster on fire in the middle of the reception area, hasn't he? I mean, I think the thing that maybe isn't being covered, and we'll talk about the Pentagon a little bit because the same thing is happening there, is that imagine like being a lifer working for the civil service and having these nutters come in and have a completely different view of healthcare or the military and just try and change the culture overnight. I mean, it's causing people to, what we're hearing through back channels is people are just incensed by this.
Yeah, this is what I was frustrated with in terms of like the Democrats who are RFK curious or RFK supporters during the campaign.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they liked a certain aspect of what he was saying, whether it's about like eating healthy, you know, there's things that he advocates that everyone agrees with, you know,
Right.
There's too much chemicals in food and all this kind of too many genetically engineered products.
Yeah, it's the Skittles argument, right? It's
Yeah,
just,
I mean,
you know,
food dyes, like very
Yeah.
few people are in favor of food dyes, right? So there's always some things about RFK that you can say, okay, well, that's nice. But the thing is, the reason why so many of us were so adamantly opposed to RFK, and were like a lot of Democrats wanted Harris to make a deal with RFK to bring him into the fold, keep him away from Trump, promise him HHS, and she refused to meet with him. And a lot of Democrats were upset about that, but I wasn't, because the reason why I wasn't, because I followed RFK for a decade and I listened to what he had to say. I watched him go from an environmental lawyer who did a lot of good work back in the day. He obviously got bored with that or descended into madness from the heroin or from the brain worm or whatever. And he veered off into this world of conspiracy theories over the last decade, which only got worse during COVID. And I watched all of that play out. I watched his interviews and everything else and heard all of his crackpot theories. And so I think a lot of the American people did not hear that stuff from RFK. So now what we have is we have him deciding, once again, he goes in there and you think there's two ways. It's almost like Trump in 2017, where you ask yourself, is the gravity of the office and the responsibility of what he's going to have to undertake here going to weigh on him? And is he going to let some of this mania and nonsense go and grow up and mature and do the right thing here? And I think that's what some people hoped of RFK, but like Bill Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana, and others in the Senate who voted to confirm him because, of course, he said what they wanted to hear during the confirmation process. But now the real RFK, the conspiracy theorist, is all coming out in the open. And we're hearing he's got HHS studying, the cause of autism, which he says is going to come up with, because he's convinced, of course, that it's vaccines. And, we're hearing that his latest thing that he announced yesterday was about testosterone levels, which he links possibly to food dyes and other things, that this is causing testosterone levels in American teenagers to bottom out and sperm counts to bottom out. And human civilization is going to be extinct because we're not virile enough as young men, I guess.
What's so sad about it is that the people who are watching, who either have people in their families who have ADHD or autism or Tourette's. I mean, he was going after people with Tourette's. He was referring to these things as curable or preventable diseases,
right?
Which is so offensive. And I have an autistic son, as you know, and I feel like, there is just absolutely no thought for how these things will be digested and processed by people. And I don't know, I'm going to play the clip and we can talk more, but the more I watch this clip, I've seen it a few times now, the more I think this goes back to the Trump thing with eugenics. I think they believe that there is a kind of perfect human specimen because, he works out and, despite his voice, obviously, but, he considers himself to be very fit and healthy. And I do believe that they have a view of humanity that is so screwed up where that anybody who has any kind of dysfunction or disability is considered a second-class or third-class citizen. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he's had a few eugenics conversations with Donald Trump over a Diet Coke. Let's take a look.
And these are a broad category, the ones that Marty mentioned, like ADHD, the neurological disorders, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, and autism. All of these are injuries that I never heard of when I was a kid. They were not part of the nomenclature. They weren't part of the dialogue. There was zero spent in this country treating chronic disease when my uncle was president. Today it's about $1.8 trillion annually. It's bankrupting our nation. 74% of American kids cannot qualify for military service. Oh, how are we going to maintain our global leadership with such a sick population? We have all these autoimmune diseases, these exotic diseases. And again, I never heard of juvenile diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, and 100 others that were just unknown when I was a kid.
So because he's never heard of them, therefore they didn't exist. That's the first thing. I mean, firstly, let's just be absolutely clear. The reason when he was younger that we didn't spend money on these things is because we didn't have the awareness that we have now. We didn't have the expertise in testing. We didn't understand how a neurodivergent brain operates and how it differs to a neurotypical brain. and that we should celebrate the fact that medicine and therapy has improved, but more importantly, that we are interested in people who are different. Because when he was younger, the people that he's talking about, people with Tourette's or with ADHD, were so criticized and so ostracized from society. They were called all sorts of names. They were called weird. I mean, eccentric would have been generous back then. These people were bullied. And I'm so thrilled that the world has woken up and changed over the last 30 years. And the reason now that so many kids are being diagnosed with ADHD is because we know what it is. When I was a kid, and I'll never forget the kid in my class in England, he would get caned. He was so hyperactive. He so couldn't focus. And they would drag him off to the principal's office where he would get beaten with a bamboo stick. And I remember his face, Ron, coming back into class. This poor kid was clearly neurodivergent.
Yeah, that's the thing. For him to go back to the 60s or the early 70s, where he grew up in an uber wealthy, famous family, and say, well, I they didn't talk about these things when I was a kid. Well, that's true. My brother was autistic. He was born in 1976. I never heard the word autistic back then. They didn't know what it was. They just said he was retarded, right? I mean, that's all we were told, right? They didn't know what autism was. It wasn't until, they knew what it was, but it was never diagnosed. We didn't actually get a diagnosis of that formally until like the early 80s on my brother. So, but back then, he's just slow, or, whatever the case may be, things are diagnosed. And here's the other thing. His aunt was lobotomized by his grandfather because she had either autism or some, I forget what exactly she had. She clearly was on the spectrum, and she was lobotomized and put in an institution. And that's what they did back then. They put people in institutions, they locked them up, or they euthanized them, or they sent them away. That's how we dealt with that back then. And so, for him to anecdotally say, well, all of these things must be caused by lifestyle or diet or whatever, because, they didn't exist back then. It just goes to show you how utterly misguided he is. Now, I will say I agree with some things, like obesity is a problem. The foods that we eat compared to back then is a problem, and they contribute to a lot of things.
Don't blame the customer. Don't blame the consumer. Blame the manufacturer. Yeah. Blame the food industry.
But that's not the reason for everything, is the point. But, so the question is, here's the other question. When he has HHS do all these studies now on all these conspiracies, who's going to be doing these studies? And can we really rely on them, that they're accurate? Because is he going to report out results that, if they disprove his conspiracies, is he going to allow those reports to come out, or is he going to order that they be changed or modified? That's going to be the interesting thing to watch. So, by the way, HHS cut a massive amount of staff from their budget in a lot of different areas. And so we are diverting resources away from things that have been scientifically proven to work into studies on his conspiracy theories. We'll see.
And the fear is that people who rely on medication, especially if you have ADHD and things that, you need Adderall, you need things that help you survive, give you the ability to go to work and hold down a job, that if he demonizes medication, then that's going to cause a huge number of problems for people. And then the other thing which he mentioned is that he wants to create a database of autistic people.
Yeah.
And he wants to, get access to Social Security data and everything else, and effectively create a list of people who are not up to standard, it seems.
Another thing Adolf Hitler did, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. This is exactly the playbook of the authoritarianist regime. And, it's hard, isn't it? Because he's trading on his family name, but he is an absolute disaster for this country.
Yeah, I mean, if he had been born, it's the same thing as Trump. If he had been born Robert F. Johnson, he'd be running a hot dog stand somewhere at a baseball game.
And these
based on talent
scientists
alone.
These scientists and doctors that he claims are going to do these studies, I know who they're going to be. They're going to be these quacks, because there's a whole network of them.
That's it.
The same ones that were pushing ivermectin and
the America Frontline Doctors. That's all his buddies. Joseph Ladopo in Florida
thingy.
The whole bunch of them. So that's the question. Yeah, is he going to have real HHS scientists doing these studies, or is he going to bring in quacks?
Yeah, it's a very sad state of affairs, because I think as administrations come and go, you could always count on the person running HHS or the FDA or the CDC. They were always people who kind of were level-headed. But to now have given those departments over to lunatics is conspiracy theorists, worse than a lunatic, is very detrimental to American society. And there was the news yesterday, I made a video on it last night, about the testing on milk, and how, just the amount of cuts that have been made to HHS and the FDA mean that they're not going to be testing food, and food standards will fall. And yet Trump's trying to do a deal with Europe. Please buy our chlorinated chicken. Please buy our food produce. And yet at the same time, they're cutting any kind of standards for these things for American consumers.
I mean, RFK has always been against, has always been an advocate of raw milk, always been against pasteurization. But, pasteurization ended so many diseases in this country and around the world that killed tens of millions of people. Diseases that were contracted from dairy products, from cows, that were all eradicated because of pasteurization. But yes, that's one of his big things. He wants to lead a movement back to consume raw milk again. And how is he doing that? He just massively cut people who inspect raw milk to make sure it's safe, and who inspect food as well. So they were already shorthanded, and now they're even more shorthanded. So you can see, like, whether he's discouraging vaccines, not encouraging vaccines or not promoting them,
and we haven't even mentioned measles,
inspectors for food products. You see the subtle ways he's working behind the scenes to implement his conspiracies.
Not so subtle, though.
No, not so subtle. That's probably a bad word.
Yeah. Meanwhile, measles has spread into like 5-6 states now.
Well, when I mean subtle, though, because like publicly he came out and gave a statement saying, yes, everybody should get vaccinated for the measles, but then he immediately undermines it behind the scenes with things that he does,
which is kind of how Trump operates. Again, it's like they don't put their name to anything. They manage somehow to disassociate. I actually have a clip of Trump claiming that the price of eggs has come down because of his super skills. I checked just before the show on Ralph's website to see what the prices were, and they are still as high as ever. Even the nasty, cheap kind of battery eggs were still like $7 for 12. And, the average price was between $9 and $12 for a dozen eggs. Let's see what Trump watch him wriggle out of this one.
But if you remember my first week, I was standing here, Paul, and they were screaming about eggs. The cost of eggs have gone through the roof. They were up like 500%, crazy, like 4 or 5 times. And we won't have eggs for Easter, they were saying. There will be no eggs. You can't order eggs. They wanted us to order plastic in the shape of eggs. Well, yesterday we had 48,000 people at the Easter hunt. They call it the Easter roll at the White House. And we had all eggs. And as you know, the cost of eggs has come down like 93, 94% since we took office. And they're pretty much normally priced now. Great job. Our Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, did a very good job. But groceries have come down. It's all coming down. The only thing that hasn't come down, but it hasn't gone up much, are interest rates, and we think the Fed should lower the rate. We think that it's a perfect time to lower the rate, and would like to see our chairman be early or on time as opposed to late. Late.
So we need him to bring down the price of groceries, but he's not allowed to to affect the price of interest rates. That's supposed to be done independently. Let's talk about the eggs first. I mean, this is a lie, isn't it? This is an outright lie. And he's worked out that, well, he worked out years ago, that you can say anything and no one's going to question you, especially if you're the president.
Yeah, well, this is where he makes a mistake, though. I mean, because you can lie about a lot of things and people will overlook you. You can fool people. My approval ratings are 97%, or inflation is this, or, all these figures, facts, and numbers that he throws around, which we know are all lies, but you have to be somewhat educated on top of the news to figure out that he's lying a lot of the times. And a lot of his followers don't know he's lying about a lot of this stuff. But on this, it's such a preposterous claim. And it's such a claim that every American, just about every American, except for a handful of uber wealthy people like him who have never been in a grocery store, the rest of us all know how much eggs cost. And we all can walk into a grocery store and look at the prices, and we all buy them, most of us. And so we can see that he's lying. So this is where he really shoots himself in the foot on something like this, because he's set. And then, of course, he has to exaggerate it. Even if he said like 10% or 20%, probably could have gotten away with it, because people would have thought, well, maybe they're just high in my area, but they've come down in other places, right?
But 97, but in this 98%. Case,
the lie was so insane and so preposterous that it just made him look like a complete fool. And it's because it's about something that everybody can see with their own eyes as a lie. So yeah, that was a big mistake. But of course, you also see the authoritarian praising each other. This is, if you pay attention to these people, half of their interviews are praising each other. Right. How great everybody is. So they had to praise Brooke Rollins. Brooke Rollins doing a tremendous job. Brooke Rollins is an idiot. She's a fool. And so look, here's the other odd thing is wholesale egg prices have come down substantially in the last few months because they've imported a bunch of eggs, but that's not hit the retail shelves yet. So somebody's making some windfall profits right now. And Trump could call that out and say, how, if he was to be honest, he could say wholesale prices of eggs have come way down in the last few months. Why are the retail prices the same? Somebody in corporate America is gouging here, but he's not going to say that. But that's the reality.
Let's talk about this Easter egg hunt for a minute, because Pete Hegseth was there. I don't know if he'd had a drink or what, but, certainly the clip we have of him, he was very much overexcited. This is where he was trying to blame the media for his own appointees disclosing these latest scandals. Of course, it turns out that he wasn't just sharing national secrets on Signal with a journalist, but now his wife was privy to it as well, and his lawyer and various other people. I mean, this is an ongoing problem, which, as I said earlier, is causing all sorts of issues at the Pentagon. Let's take a look at him talking to the camera, talking to CNN, and getting a little upset about it.
This is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Okay, well, there's a few points here. Where do you want to start?
What is he doing? I mean, we have never, ever in the history of this country had a Secretary of Defense do anything like this. I mean, what is he doing? He goes out to the Easter egg thing, and he jumps in front of the cameras, and he starts this nonsense about first of all, it's not the time or the place or anything to do this. I'm surprised he even showed up or even went in front of the press or the cameras on this point, because, and you see the kids there, they're like, we're here for an Easter egg hunt. What the hell? What's going on here? And of course we learned a lot of other things too. But first of all, the 4 people who have been let go are people that are friends of his, that he has worked with for at least a decade, who have worked with him in his charities or at Fox. These are people he brought in with him that were supposed to be his right-hand men, his team, his boys.
In the circle of trust.
And they're the ones who saw the signal chats, the Musk briefings on China, and even they were appalled at what was happening. Even they were shocked at what was going on behind the scenes, him not getting his work done. We heard that Trump wanted the plans drawn up for the missile defense shield. And so all these generals scrambled and got their staffs together and cranked out a blueprint of a plan on how to do it. And it sat on Hegseth's desk for 3 weeks while he toured the country talking about DEI and doing push-ups with troops. I mean, the guy doesn't do the job of Secretary of State. We know that he installed a studio in the Pentagon to have his makeup done so he can do Fox interviews. How many times did Lloyd Austin do TV interviews, or any Secretary of Defense? You rarely ever see them on TV. This guy's on TV and social media every single day, posting away like a Twitter troll, like a right-wing social media influencer, because that's all he knows. That's all he's qualified to do. Here's a post. This kind of nonsense.
This is the post from Jennifer Jacobs that said, Secretary of Defense Hegseth recently ordered modifications to the green room next to the Pentagon press briefing room to add a makeup studio that could be used to prep for TV appearances. The price tag for the project was several $1,000s. The space previously had minimal furnishings. A new director-style chair and large mirror with makeup lighting was installed. Hegseth has used the briefing room for Fox News hits. I mean, he's straight out of Donald Trump's kind of genetic pool, isn't he? These people just do television. They are actors. He's playing the role of the Secretary of Defense. Trump is playing the role of the president. Neither of them are particularly well cast, and they don't understand that this is actually a real job. That's why he didn't sign the papers for 3 weeks. That's why Trump doesn't take advice on major international trade issues, because they just think it's a bit of role play, cosplay.
So whenever Trump gets asked about the job Hegseth's doing, he talks about the Houthis, right? He says, well, he's doing a great job. We're bombing those Houthis back to the Stone Age, right? And then, there's been multiple Fox reports, including one today. This is Fox. This is not NPR, right? This is not MSNBC. Fox reported today that this has been a disaster. We've had multiple Reaper drones shot down since this happened by the Houthis. There has been no let up in their activities, their attacks, none whatsoever. There appears to be no capability diminished in any way by what we're doing. And each one of these Reaper drones that keep getting shot down costs $30 million. And the odd thing is that most media is completely ignoring the Houthi story and what is happening in Yemen with DOD. And Fox is the only one doing accurate reporting on this stuff. I have no idea why, but they are. And I've talked about this. Fox actually does have very good reporters out in the field on certain things. And their national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin, who's done some of this reporting, is one of their few good reporters. And Trump hates her guts. So that's the thing. Like, every time they ask Trump, well, what about Hegseth? He'll go, well, he's doing a great job with this Yemen thing. But he's not. The Yemen thing is a mess too. I don't see Hegseth surviving. Here's what I think. I think if Trump could go back before he nominated Hegseth, he would, knowing what he knows now, he would not do it, because I think Hegseth has been much more of a fuck up than even he expected. But I think at this point, what we hear the reporting from behind the scenes is Trump doesn't want to give the media a win. He thinks it will make him look bad by firing him. So he's determined to stick with Hegseth. And what's becoming increasingly clear about this administration right now is that the only way you can get fired in this administration is to be disloyal to Trump.
Right.
As long as you're loyal to Trump, there's no level of incompetence or criminality or malfeasance that you can do to get yourself fired as long as you're loyal to Trump.
Yeah, I posted a similar thing on Blue Sky the other day. I was just like, Trump surrounds himself with like-minded people. And so therefore, he doesn't see them as the enemy. He sees them as his henchmen, ultimately. And as in any good movie, the henchmen are the baddies, and they work for the baddie. And so the baddies all stick together. They all stay on the same team. And we can see that Pete Hegseth is a wrong-un. It's just very, very clear. And I do worry, about national security on so many levels now, especially when it comes to other countries not sharing intelligence with us. I just think with all of these things, including food standards and everything, this is isolating the US more and more and more. We've already seen people are not traveling here, Ron. The advice of all of these other countries is do not go to the United States. It is not safe. You could end up in a El Salvadorian gulag.
I'm in a state, Maine, that is heavily dependent on Canadian tourism. That
right.
Canadians come here every summer like crazy, and people here are freaking out. The hotels,
it's down nearly
the restaurants
40% from Canada.
That their tourist industry is going to be absolutely wrecked. And that's the case around the world, whether it's flights, hotels, bookings. I mean, all over the United States, not just Maine, everywhere. So, the other curious thing, a little side note to the Hegseth thing is that there was a report out that North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who the Democrats have been desperately trying to draft to run for Senate in 2026 against Tom Tillis. There's a report now that he is leaning towards now getting in the race. That's his lean, that he's going to do it. And I thought it's no coincidence that story came out at the same time as these Hegseth scandals, because Tom Tillis cast the deciding vote to confirm Hegseth.
Right.
So that will be an issue in this campaign, especially. Yeah. And that's a seat that Democrats can win if Roy Cooper runs.
There was a story out a couple of days ago, I think it might have been CBS that were reporting it, saying that they are starting to look for a potential replacement for Hegseth.
Yeah.
You think there's any truth to that?
I think Trump would love I think Trump would really love to dump Hegseth. I think he realizes that this is a problem for him, and it's going to continue to be a problem for him. I don't think Hegseth is like a long-term guy, but I think Trump is going to wait to move him out, I think, when there's not a controversy. So, because he doesn't want to be seen as like giving the media a win, which is the other quote we've heard. I think he's going to find a time and a place later this year to move him out and try and make it look like this is a new opportunity for Hegseth, and he's not really being fired. And it's going to be a time when there's no scandal. He just needs Hegseth to go a couple of weeks without a scandal for him to be able to pull that move off. So I think he wants Musk gone at this point. I think he realizes that was a mistake, and I think he wants Hegseth gone too. My suspicion is he probably wants Lutnick or Navaro to go at some point too, but that's probably not going to happen for a while.
It's all starting to be so reminiscent of Trump's first 4 years.
Yeah, sure. That's how it was then.
It didn't take
revolving
long.
Door.
The revolving door. And
every
like day
4
we'd
press
be like,
secretaries, 3 secretaries of state, 4 secretaries of defense. Like as we just saw with Biden, most administrations have 1, maybe 2. Trump had 4 or 5 for every office. Chief of staff, what do you have? 4 or 5 chiefs of staff? Like that just doesn't happen ever it's never happened with any administration in the history of the United States. And yes, I think we're going to see a replay of that with the revolving door. You know what's interesting? I saw today this little poll of MAGA people where they were like doing one of these online Twitter polls of the cabinet officials and amongst themselves, and they were voting like to give which ones they like the most. And the 2 cabinet officials that MAGA that graded the lowest are Pam Bondi and Kash Patel because
Interesting.
they were promised all these prosecutions. They were promised
Right.
all these people were going to be locked up, right? Epstein, the client list and all that. And none of that's happened. So those are the two least among MAGA followers. Those are the two least popular cabinet officials.
Let's do a quick update on deportations. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, of course. A couple of senior lawmakers have kind of gone down to El Salvador to try and see if he's okay. I think Cory Booker's down there at the moment. But it was Van Holen that was there, who actually got to sit with him and talk to him and spend a bit of time with him. And they had some photographs taken. Then he kind of came back and did a report on this. Fox News did not like this, of course, as ever. Let's take a look at how they kind of dealt with this story with him.
Worried, though, that you are sticking your neck out for somebody who maybe down the line is proven to be connected to MS-13.
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights, his constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. And the most recent federal district court judge that looked at this, Judge Zilinskis, said that the administration had presented no evidence of his connection to MS-13 or, by the way, to any other criminal gang or terrorist activity.
Okay.
So, again, all the issues you raised, why aren't they presenting those to the courts? So, again, put up or shut up in court, which is where we litigate these things.
Okay, so you know that there's been
So, I mean, the point he's making is a very important one. That the probably the biggest danger to this republic is Trump's failure to give these people due process, and this will extend beyond deportees because they are the wrong shade of white, right? This will eventually extend to American citizens as well. I mean, it has in a couple of cases where he will decide who are the criminals. He will decide who is to be spared. Eventually it'll be, all the autistic people and then eventually all the Jews. And it'll be like, right, they can all go to an El Salvadorian prison as well. I mean, I'm not joking about this stuff. I mean, this is really where it's heading. And so it's important that these senators step in and make this point about the value of due process.
It is so that clip and that quote was something I was waiting for a Democrat to say since this started.
Yes.
Because I thought there was a time when the Republican argument was winning politically until Democrats led by Van Hollen shifted their talking points away from the individuals towards the Constitution and the rule of law. Look, I was a criminal defense lawyer for a long time, and I represented thousands of really bad people who did really bad stuff. And anyone who's done criminal defense gets asked the same question at every dinner party. Every time somebody says, "What do you do?" we typically say, "I'm a lawyer," and we try to leave it at that. And then they ask, "Well, what kind of law?" And you almost wince and you say, "I do criminal defense," because then you're always getting this. How can you defend people,
especially if you're a Republican,
terrible
Ron?
Things, right? And so you learn the way to answer this question, which is the truth, which is you're representing the people. You do get to know the people and everything, but I've represented many people that I despised, hated, and I hated what they did. But the point is, you're not representing them. You're representing the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. Take this, for example, Ernesto Miranda. People know the last name. They don't know who he is. Miranda rights, right? Ernesto Miranda was arrested and convicted of rape and robbery. He, I think he was later exonerated, but that's the point. He was charged with some pretty heavy shit. But what came out of that was Miranda rights. The fact that police have to tell you what your rights are. You have a right to a lawyer. You don't have to talk to me. So the point is, when you're defending someone like Ernesto Miranda, you're defending constitutional rights. You're not defending him, and you're not justifying what he did. And for a time there, I was concerned about the politics of this because in these migrant situations, like we don't, when you jump in to defend someone's due process rights, we don't know what that person has done. We don't know necessarily their background. We don't have all the facts about that person, whether they have gang tattoos or not, whether they beat their wives or not. We don't know that. So Democrats can't get bogged down in the weeds of each individual person's life and case. They have to get above that, and they have to say what Van Hollen just said, which is, look, I have compassion for these people, but I'm not defending each individual person and what they did. I'm defending the concept of due process, the concept that you can't disappear people, grab people off the streets and have Tom Homan say they're a gang member and send them to a prison in El Salvador, which is a forced labor camp where it appears nobody leaves. That is the point. And for Democrats to win this politically, that's the argument that they need to make. And I was encouraged by the new polling that came out that shows by a 2-to-1 margin, Americans believe that Trump has gone too far with deportations, which I really did not expect to see.
Well, the good news is Kilmar has now been moved to a more comfortable, secure prison, apparently, where he has his own room and, food and stuff. But the point that you're making is the one that everybody needs to understand, is that we are a nation of laws, and those laws must apply to everybody. And in the same way that, protected speech goes for everybody. And that's when you look at some of these other cases. Mahmoud Khalil, for example, and this poor girl that was abducted off the street, walking along the street, looking at her phone. She kind of co-authored an op-ed years ago at Tufts University. Her speech is protected by nature of her being in the United States. It's in the Bill of Rights. This is what we are entitled to. And we have to stick to the Constitution and to the law as it is written. And it's not one rule for them and another rule for another. We have to finish in a minute. I've got a couple of very quick ones. Talk to me about Tim Pool, this kind of Russian-influenced podcaster who got a seat in the White House press briefing room in the new media seat and chose his first opportunity to speak to kind of blow some smoke up Donald Trump and Caroline Leavitt. Let's take a quick...
On an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies, you've created this new media seat. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you could comment on the unprofessional behavior.
Yeah. We should remind people that he was being paid a fortune for his podcast, and he never really asked where the money was coming from. But it turned out that it was Russian influence and he was doing Russian talking points. Is that right?
Yeah. And he was also one of the ones who went nuts over Zilinski not wearing a tie to the White House. And here he is in a hoodie and a beanie cap in the White House briefing room. So, when the White House announces we're going to create this new media seat, we're going to bring in podcasters and stuff and independent media and let them ask questions, I like the concept of it if it's like applied the right way. Like, I agree that there's too much elitism in that room, in how the White House Correspondents Association does things. I think that I don't have a problem with the concept of bringing in independent journalists who are qualified and who have shown that they're competent and reasonable and normal. So, when this thing is announced, you kind of hope maybe they'll do it in a balanced way, or at least 2-to-1. They'll bring in some right wingers, but then they'll also bring in left wingers too, podcasters, independent media, and they'll kind of rotate it around. And maybe we'll get some interesting questions that have never been asked before. I know if I was in there, I got a million questions I would ask that no one in that room has ever asked before. I would love a shot at this, right? So I thought this could actually be interesting. But instead, it's clear, no, what they want is, and every single person who's been in that room has covered themselves in excrement with the questions. All they're doing is they're coming in there and they're praising Donald. Why is Donald Trump so wonderful? We had the one person I think from Lindell TV or whatever, Mike Lindell's channel, that talked about how fit Donald Trump was and how he looks good and looks like he's lost weight and he must be working out with RFK. I mean, that was one of the questions. So Poole gets his chance, which he has a huge podcast audience. And what does he say? His question, he finally gets his chance. His question is, what do you say about all the people in this room who are mean to us for asking dumb questions? I mean, that's the question you're going to ask. I mean, it's like, it's embarrassing. And it makes independent media look bad. They're not representing independent media very well to legacy media outlets in that room.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear, even though they reversed course with the decision about the AP and Reuters on rotation, now they've, the court said that they have to have those news agencies back in the press room. Ultimately, the majority, 95% of the outlets in there now are far-right Trump state media, effectively, asking all the right questions and making it easier for Caroline Leavitt to, tell her stories. She, remember on day one, she was like, I will never lie. I will never lie. And here we are, or about 450,000 lies later. Okay, we have to finish. I just want to put up a final posting from Trump, which is my favorite one of the week. And it says, Melania and I will be going to the funeral of Pope Francis in Rome. We look forward to being there because, of course, everyone looks forward to a funeral. Ron, thanks for spending your afternoon with me or evening with me, and appreciate you as always. If you want to download the audio podcast of the show, you can do that later tonight. If you want to rewind and share, watch it again, comment down below, check out our sponsors, please do all that stuff, and we'll come back next Wednesday at the same time with another Uncovered. Thanks, Ron. Bye for now.
The good news is Trump won't make the Pope's funeral about himself. We know that, right?
Of course not. All that to look forward to. All right, bye for now.
All right.